Joining me now, Sidney Powell. She's an author, she's an attorney, she's a legal commentator, she's a speaker, and she's on our show. Sidney, great to have you.
Thank you, John. Great to be with you. Is Corey there with you?
Corey's here with me. I'm in the Corey Lewandowski Embassy. Just got back from Tampa a little late last evening, and where the president gave him a big shout out. And so I just saw him a few moments ago as he popped into the studio to say hi. But, yeah,
awesome.
He's here.
Hi, Corey.
He just stepped out for, where is he? He's getting a cup of coffee or something, but I will mention that. Now, Sidney, Michael Cohen, what's the deal with this guy?
Oh, what an unfortunate situation and horrible lawyering. I mean, I've just never seen anything like it. I cannot imagine why he did what he did other than to be in a position to, well, I hate to say it, but it sounds like, he wanted or was trying to get ammunition against the president himself. It makes no sense. I can't imagine why any lawyer would do that. So he's destroyed his own credibility. He obviously has no sense of ethics. His only duty was to protect his client. It's a fiduciary responsibility for a lawyer to a client. They're supposed to put the interests of the client first, and there are no circumstances under which it can be said that he did that. He did the opposite. He was looking for something to benefit himself.
I tell you what was odd to me is that all of a sudden he says that the president knew about this meeting, which I don't think he did. And I had Corey Lewandowski on Tuesday, who was the campaign manager at the time of this meeting, and he said he didn't know anything about it. Hope Hicks didn't know anything about it. He seriously doubted the president knew anything about it because he would have mentioned it to him. He did not. So he said it never came up, and he was not aware of it. But here's a guy that tapes everything, right? He's got a tape for every single thing he ever did. I understand he's got tapes. But yet this conversation, he doesn't have a tape. So it can't be corroborated.
Well, on top of that, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what. There was nothing wrong with Trump Jr. having that meeting. And on top of that, everybody needs to remember that meeting was a flat-out setup. The woman came from Fusion GPS to begin with and went back and reported to Fusion GPS after the meeting. So she was one of the people who was providing bait. And the State Department had to provide her special permission to come in the country to do that. So the whole thing was part of the orchestrated effort to destroy the Trump campaign. It matters not a whit in terms of legalities.
So now we got the Manafort trial going on, and of course the opening arguments had nothing to do with Russian collusion or Russians in the campaign. It all had to do with Paul Manafort not paying his taxes and laundering money and whatever it is. I don't know all the legalities of it, but as I read through it, had nothing to do with the original subject of this special counsel. I mean, at what point do you just say there's no evidence here? I mean, how long does this go on? Until President Trump's out of office? Until after his second term? Does it just go on in perpetuity? When are we going to get some evidence or something? When are we going to get something?
Well, we're not going to get any evidence that President Trump or his campaign did anything wrong in terms of the Russians or anything else for that matter, because it's been a setup from the get-go. I firmly believe Mueller was a big part of the insurance policy that Page and Strzok talked about in their text messages. I don't think for a minute that in 24 hours or less after Comey's memos were published in the New York Times that Mueller becomes special counsel. That's how long it happened. 24 hours, less than 24 hours, Mueller's leaving his law firm to become special counsel when the day before he interviewed with President Trump to head the FBI. These guys were talking about this for a long time before that happened. So it's all part of their plan to bring down the president. It's going to drag on as long as Mueller can possibly drag it on. I don't see him winding it up anytime soon at all. In fact, my sources tell me he's still bringing in people for interviews and subpoenaing documents. So
yeah, I don't see this.
I don't see it going away. Horrible.
I don't see it going away. I mean, I think if the intent, which I am one of the people, and anybody can criticize me all they want, it's my belief that their mission is to drive this president from office, whether it's losing, resigning, something. They want him out. And so if that's the object, I mean, there's no reason to stop. They're going to keep trying to do whatever they can do. But the bottom line is they have absolutely all this time, all this money, all these people. They have no evidence of any collusion because none existed. And so they're never going to find evidence. So they have to throw straws at these other things, Sidney, trying to come up with something. And
now they're trying to pressure people close to the president to turn on him to say whatever it is they want him to say. That's the whole purpose of the raid on Cohen, and that's the whole purpose of the relentless prosecution of Manafort. They have directed all manner and means of prosecutorial terrorist tactics against Manafort. I mean, the pre-dawn raid of his home, piling on charges against him. He's now defending on two fronts. He's got two trials to face. Putting him in solitary confinement, you name it, they're throwing it at him. And they've frozen all his assets. He has no money. They even froze the assets of his kids. You can't imagine the pressure the man's under.
And so, to what end?
To try to get him to say whatever it is they want him to say against the president.
But if nothing happened, there's nothing to say. I mean, you can't make
it is.
But you can't make things
up. If Manafort would not have been indicted had he not spent 3 months being the campaign manager for Donald Trump. And that is an outrageous abuse of prosecutorial power to target someone like that and set 17 lawyers going back 20 years into his records to find something to pin on him. And that is exactly what they did. The Department of Justice had passed on investigating him and doing any prosecution of him back in 2008, I think it was. So this is purely a politically targeted prosecution to put pressure on Manafort to turn on Trump. Mueller views Manafort as the tip of the spear to drive through the heart of Donald Trump.
But if there's nothing to turn, what does he do? I mean, he can't make things up.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
my question.
Yeah, they get witnesses to do that all the time under enough pressure. You'd be surprised what somebody'd do to get out of solitary confinement. I mean, there's a great article by Bernard Carrick on Newsmax today or yesterday. I just tweeted it out at Sidney Powell, the #1. And, he went through this. He knows exactly what he's talking about. I'd commend his book to everyone's reading, too, From Jailer to Jailed, to understand what they do when they want to abuse somebody and get to a certain point. And it's purely a political prosecution. We've got to stop this kind of stuff. Prosecutors need to be held accountable, and part of our criminal justice reform needs to be to limit the charges that can be brought against somebody other than for violent crimes or drug cases or something like that. But, to try to defend 20-some counts and even more many times of an indictment is an impossible task. They throw so much at you, it costs hundreds of millions of dollars to try to defend yourself, and then something's going to stick just because the jury thinks if you've been charged with that many things, you've done something wrong. And another thing we've got to do is remind people of the presumption of innocence, and particularly in cases like this. I mean, a single juror can stop an unjust criminal conviction if they'll just sit there and say, no, I am not voting guilty on any count. Mm-hmm. And I think they should do that on all these political prosecutions. These people should not be convicted simply because they worked for Donald Trump, and I don't care what evidence the government produces. These are political prosecutions.
So even if Manafort did commit these crimes, like, not paying his taxes, you think that he was targeted politically, even though he didn't pay taxes like everybody else should do?
Well, I mean, no. If he actually committed a serious crime, the jury needs to look at that evidence and weigh it very carefully. But we also need to send some kind of statement to prosecutors that we're not going to continue political prosecutions.
If you read your book, and I encourage everybody to do this because it's scary. I mean, somebody asked me, hey, what's the book about? It's like a scary story that's true. It's really, because if you read it and you find out the power that these prosecutors have and some of what they've done, which is very abusive, is scary. And Sidney's book has been taken off of Amazon. Like, if you write a book that challenges the system, you get your website comes down, you can't sell your book. I mean, it's kind of amazing, isn't it, that you get targeted because you're blowing the whistle? Isn't that crazy?
Yes, I think they've shadow banned me. Now they're running out of stock. But they've done things like lose my books, and then somebody else is selling them on Amazon. It's been bizarre. They put up error messages all the time when people go to order it. But the best place to get it is SidneyPowell.com or license2lie.com. We've got plenty in stock, and I'm getting ready to come out with a second edition, and that will be a paperback, a very nice, high-quality paperback. Should be out in a couple of weeks.
All right, go to license2lie.com, get her book. We're with Sidney Powell, author, attorney, legal commentator, speaker. She's a former federal prosecutor, a veteran of 500 federal appeals, and she has written the book License to Lie, which you absolutely have to get, which is about the federal prosecution system that we have and some of the abuses that go on there. What's the end game for Mueller now?
I think he's going to drag it out as long as he can. He's going to make Trump's presidency as difficult as he can. At some point, he'll probably do a report that tries to result in an impeachment. I don't think impeachment's going to be on the table, really. I don't see that as a viable option at all. I can't imagine this president being impeached. There's not enough political power to do that. But he's going to make it as difficult for him as he can. I mean, he's already cost every member of his administration hundreds of thousands of dollars for legal fees and had them dealing with this when they need to be dealing with matters of importance to the country. The whole thing has been one of the most destructive acts in our entire political history.
Well, good timing. This just in from the Washington Post. I just got this off the wire. President Trump says that the Paul Manafort case has, quote, nothing to do with collusion, and he calls for the Attorney General to end this special counsel probe. Let me read you the president's tweet. Came out at 9:34 a.m. Just a few moments ago. He said, Paul Manafort worked for Ronald Reagan, Bob Dole, and many other highly prominent and respected political leaders. By the way, he also worked for President Gerald Ford. He worked for me. President Trump says he worked for me for a very short time. Why didn't government tell me that he was under investigation? These old charges have nothing to do with collusion. And then he says, a hoax, exclamation, a hoax. I mean, that's my point. That's why we had you on. He also said at 9:24, right after that, he said, this is a terrible situation, and Attorney General Jeff Sessions should stop this rigged witch hunt right now before it continues to stain our country any further. Bob Mueller is totally conflicted, and his 17 angry Democrats that are doing this dirty work are a disgrace to the USA. President Trump tweeted that out moments ago. Comment.
It's been a hoax from the beginning. It was contrived through the intelligence community. I've got an article on that from last week at the Daily Caller that went absolutely viral. All the members of the intelligence community got together and pulled this off. And it goes back to at least 2015 when the Obama administration was spying on everybody under the sun and using the NSA database to run queries on their political opposition. And then Susan Rice and Samantha Power were unmasking people right and left. The use of FISA inquiries tripled in 2016 and during the campaigns. It was all politically targeted, and the FBI gave unlimited access to raw FISA intel to probably Fusion, GPS, and CrowdStrike. We know from the FISA court opinion they gave it to 2 private contractors, and nobody's even addressed that yet.
Unbelievable. I tell you what, the beat goes on, but these two tweets coming out here by the president are very telling. Sidney, Powell, we're out of time for today. Thank you for being with us. We really appreciate it. Go to license2lie.com, license2lie.com.